This is from Atari. They're, I think, 4. I got them at a halal festival. My husband is kids back. They look so cute. I'll take a picture of her. Oh yeah, you need to wear like higher socks. Can I picture her?
Gaza, Gaza, you will rise. Gaza, Gaza, you will rise. We are all on your side. Gaza, Gaza, you will rise. The people are on your side. A little bit louder, let them hear us. Gaza, Gaza, you will rise. Gaza, Gaza, you will rise. Gaza, Gaza, you will rise. The people are on your side. The people are on your side. Gaza will free us all. Gaza will free us all. Zionism will fall. Zionism will fall. Gaza will free us all. Zionism will fall. Thank you, everyone. Give yourselves a hand. We are getting ready to get Hassan Piker on the stage. Who's excited to hear Hassan Piker speak? Okay, give us 2 minutes and we'll bring him up here soon. Thank you. It is my honor to introduce our next speaker, Hassan Piker. Piker, also known as Hassan Abi, was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and raised in Istanbul, Turkey. He is one of the most, if not the most famous figures on Twitch. With a long history in media work, Piker is a commentator, political analyst, and one of the most widely recognized progressive voices online today. Through his platform, Hassan constantly challenges mainstream narratives, calls out US imperialism, and amplifies the struggles of oppressed communities. Hassan uses his far reach to raise awareness around Palestine, exposing the realities of occupation, apartheid, and genocide, while standing firmly with those fighting for liberation. Please join me in welcoming Hassan Piker.
Hello. I hope I'm not too tall for this. Can everybody hear me? Let's do a quick test. All right, we'll start off with a little chant just to make sure that my voice is echoing through all the way over there to the back. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. All right, that's pretty good. Okay. I just want to say it's a real honor to be here, surrounded by so many like-minded individuals who see right from wrong, who recognize the cruelty of the illegal entity of Israel. A lot of you have family members, a lot of you have loved ones that have paid the ultimate price and have been martyred. A lot of you understand the humanity of the situation, and many of you have been around and a firm advocate for Palestinian emancipation for decades, myself included. And I will say that in these dark times, when we are all constantly flooded with images of Israel's unlimited cruelty, at least the silver lining in all of that is that this movement has finally grown, this movement has finally reached a boiling point, and that people, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people all around the world, including even in the Western world, where they were completely oblivious to the things that were happening in Palestine, are finally awakening to the realities of Israel and its genocide. First and foremost, no one would be aware of this reality if it wasn't for the Palestinians themselves, who every single day bravely take out their cameras and try to communicate to the rest of the world, who have been left in the dark for so many years, for 100 years plus, about what Israel has done to them. The bravery that they exhibit every single day, the courage that they exhibit to show what is happening to them, is the reason why so many people have woken up to this reality, to the reality of Israel's genocide. So I just want to commend every single person that has played a role, including yourselves as well, in amplifying that message and showcasing exactly what's happening. Now, as far as my own personal experience goes, I want to start back with October 7th, even though history obviously didn't start there, no matter how hard Zionist Hosbers try to claim it did. On October 8th, it seemed like Americans, at least by my experience, were not ready for a Muslim dude named Hassan to say, hold on, all of the violence that you're seeing on your screens is still very much a consequence of Israel's unrestrained cruelty and its sovereignty and its occupation over the Palestinian population. 75 years at that point of ethnic cleansing, apartheid, never offering Palestinians a contiguous state, even in areas like the West Bank that the international community has given as an olive branch. And people left my community. People said that I was a terrorist. There were websites that were instantly launched a week after October 7, 2023, to carefully and meticulously follow every single thing that I was saying and activate the ADL and numerous other Hasbara organizations, numerous other Zionist organizations that masquerade as Jewish advocacy groups in an effort to deplatform people like myself and every other person who was brave enough to say the truth, who at least would do the bare minimum to recognize exactly what was going on and to try to engage others in a broad awareness campaign. And it doesn't feel as lonely anymore as it did in the many years prior to October 7, and certainly in the immediate aftermath of October 7. Now, this is not even a sacrifice in the grand scheme of things, because I think saying the truth is of utmost importance. That's what matters more than anything else. Recognizing right from wrong matters more than anything else in this situation. So, I know many of you have probably already had to deal with Canary Mission or numerous other doxing organizations that get to operate even though they're funded by a foreign state's Knesset. They seemingly have no issues working on U.S. soil, targeting American citizens, targeting people for simply saying the truth. But I think we all know that ultimately, none of those sacrifices, all of those sacrifices are worth it at the end of the day, as long as we can all one day say that Zionism has finally ended, that Palestine is finally free. I'm here to tell you not to get discouraged when it seems as though, even with all of our collective voices, we might come across as powerless, we might feel as powerless, we might feel like change is not happening as fast as we want to. We know that every single new day can mean more death and destruction for the Palestinians, people we know, people we love, people we communicate with on a daily basis. But ultimately, their sacrifices are not in vain, and we can't let their sacrifices be in vain. Because if we go silent, if we feel discouraged, if we lean into nihilism, and if we forget about Palestine, if we forget about the Palestinians, then Israel wins. It's that simple. Some of the cruelest, most evil people on this planet want you to be silent. They want you to feel discouraged. That is the reason why they engage in doxing operations. That's the reason why they immediately call the manager and try to get you fired. But that is precisely the reason why you must not stop. You must never feel discouraged. I like to always say, it's easy to feel powerless in the face of such tremendous cruelty. I totally understand how some people want to tap out every now and then. But you must never succumb to nihilism. You must always maintain revolutionary optimism. You must always continue to organize. You must always continue to agitate. Because the quicker we can create enough insurmountable pressure that causes the American state to recalculate its double suicide pact with Israel, the quicker we can save as many Palestinian lives as possible. We do it for those who have been martyred, and we do it for those who still remain. They are resilient. They have no other option. They must survive. Their everyday existence is an act of resilience. They are steadfast, and we must do it for them. We must be steadfast in our movement as well. Whenever you feel like change is not coming, and you feel like nihilism is kicking in, remember, if you can't find it in your heart to see a better future, do it out of spite to continue this movement. Out of spite for every single person that you encounter, some of the worst people out there, the Michael Rappaports of the world, the Amy Schumers of the world, the Itamar Ben-Gvirs of the world, Satan Yahoo. Find that anger within your heart to continue. Spite is also a good enough motivator, because those are the worst people out there, and they want you to be silent. They want you to go away. They want you to feel discouraged. They want you to feel scared. So always remember, as long as you have the truth on your side, and we all do in this situation, in this genocide, as long as you continue pushing, the dam will inevitably break. And we are closer than ever before in arriving at that solution, in arriving at justice for the Palestinian population. I know it doesn't feel like it, but the reason why there's additional pressure from Western states, like the prescription of Palestine action in the UK, or, that's right, I know, fuck the UK. Participating in genocide, while also simultaneously offering conditional recognition to a Palestinian state. Palestine exists. The Palestinians exist. It's not up to you to decide that. But the reason why Western leaders have realized that they have to be even more cruel and suppress speech even more actively, hands-on. My friend Mahmoud Khalil spoke earlier today. He was unjustifiably arrested. He still has a court case that's pending. This administration is doing things that actually undermine the very fabric of American society, beyond the colonial exploitation, beyond the death and destruction, beyond the upholding of violent systems like white supremacy. The Americans actually at least had a couple things that they advocated for unconditionally, like free speech. And now they're eroding that fundamental principle. They're eroding that fundamental constitutional protection at the behest of a foreign state. And I'm telling you right now, I speak to Americans all the time, people from very different backgrounds than mine, and they're angry too. So it's up to all of us to activate them. It's up to all of us to motivate them. Become undeniable. Become unavoidable. And keep up the pressure no matter what. And one day, we will see a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Hassan Piker, everybody. Thank you, Hassan. Thank you, Hassan, for your words. Thank you for laying out what we are up against in our struggle for Gaza and our struggle for Palestine. Against the Zionist lobby, against AIPAC, against all of those that will thrash rights like the right to free speech on the altar of protecting this rogue state. Throughout the duration of our struggle, the 100 years of the fight of the Palestinian people for the liberation of their lands and for return, youth have played a critical role. From the camps of Jabalia to Jenin, to Ain al-Hilwa in Lebanon, to the far diaspora, youth have stood on the front lines of struggle, imbuing it with energy, with boldness, with daring, constantly pushing things forward. In moments of crisis and difficulty, we often see the youth, as we did in this genocide after October 7th, be the first to react. This is the tradition that we stand in the PYM. In 2009, during the Israeli war on Gaza, the PYM in North America was formed. 16 years ago this weekend, our organization took shape to respond to the situation in Gaza, to continue taking Gaza as our compass. And generation after generation, until total liberation, Gaza will remain our compass.
احنا عجينة تربتك للأرض، احنا بثار، واحنا ليالي غربتك، واحنا شباب كثار. يا عين الله تحرسوا، نزلوا على الساحات، شعب الوطن نابات. حي شبابك حيهم، حيوك بالعركات، وانتي مشاعل ضيهم لو حلقة العدنان. حيوك بالعركات، وانتي مشاعل ضيهم لو حلقة العدنان. واحنا شباب كثار. احنا اللي من يوم الشمس طلعت علينا نسور، واحنا شوارع بالقدس، واحنا تراب يثور. الشمس طلعت علينا نسور، واحنا شوارع بالقدس، واحنا تراب يثور. ما هنكفينا يا وطن وانت وطن منصور. ما هنكفينا يا وطن ما يتأثر. احنا عجينة تربتك للأرض، احنا بثار، واحنا ليالي غربتك، واحنا شباب كثار. واحنا شباب كثار. واحنا شباب المرجلي كل ساحب اللبيك، بكرة الليالي تنجلي يرجع مجد ماضيك. واحنا شباب المرجلي كل ساحب اللبيك، بكرة الليالي تنجلي يرجع مجد ماضيك. بنطفي نجمات السما للصبح يطلع فيك، واحنا فديناك الدماء أرواحنا تسديك. للأرض احنا بثار، واحنا شباب كثار. واحنا شباب كثار.
Give another round of applause for our youth. You know you have a robust movement when you have children this age leading you in struggle and leading you in chants. We're gonna chant now for a moment, and the kids are gonna take us forward. From the river to the sea.
We'll be free.
Another round of applause for all of these youth. Another round of applause for all of these children who tomorrow you will see on the front lines of protest. These children who will lead fundraisers to support the steadfastness of our people in Gaza. These children who will never be deterred by AIPAC. These children who will ensure that a two-way arms embargo is imposed. These children who will play a critical role in building the movement for the liberation of Palestine, for the Palestinian people here in Northern America. Brothers and sisters, make some noise! I now ask that everybody be seated for our next plenary session that will bring together organizations and leaders that have been at the forefront of the struggle for Palestine for the last 2 years against this genocide. As we all know, the conditions are dire. The pain of the people of Gaza, the suffering that they're forced to endure every day is deep and profound. Our responsibility is to build a movement capable of stopping that pain, of playing a role in making sure that disaster turns into justice, that calamity turns into peace, and that issues of healthcare are rectified so that all children, like the ones you saw here today, can grow old and can dream. I now pass it to Lubna Qutami to introduce our panelists. Lubna is an organizer with the PFC, an experienced struggler for Palestine, and the perfect person to take us into this topic.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Are we tired? Are we gonna stop? Are we ready to fight? Good afternoon, friends, family, and comrades, all of us who are here and those tuning in on live stream. We join today in shared grief and rage. For 693 days, we have borne witness to genocide in Gaza. For 693 days, we have opposed the systematic destruction of Palestinian life, land, infrastructure, history, and future. And for 693 days, we have resisted a war on children, the starvation of millions, repeated displacements, and an assault on truth tellers. We have shut down bridges, flooded streets, organized die-ins and sit-ins, rallies, marches, and pickets, fundraisers and conferences, doubled down on campaigns for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, sustained the popular demand for an immediate arms embargo, confronted tech, logistics, media, and other private industries colluding in genocide, and our young people launched a student uprising of historic proportions. And yet we are still here. The airstrikes continue. Starvation intensifies. Zionist and US imperialist aggression continues not only in Gaza but across the region. And the US imperialist ruling class continues to arm, fund, and provide political immunity and intelligence for genocide. Shame. Where to now for the movement for Palestinian liberation in North America? First, we turn to our beautiful people in Gaza, who over the course of history, but especially the last 2 years, have risen from the rubble time and again to teach us lessons in honesty, courage, and resistance. They have taught us what it means to hope and persevere in times of duress. They teach us what it means to sanctify life over death. They have taught us what it means to believe in the promise of freedom when it appears less plausible than ever before. That is why we here today affirm that Gaza is our compass. Gaza fuels our moral clarity, our political will, and our sense of responsibility to act with integrity, with vigilance, and with organized discipline. Despite tremendous changes within the political terrain that has accompanied the last year since we gathered here in Detroit for the first annual People's Conference, we continue to organize within a historical inflection point in which the course of history is still shifting and being made by ordinary people in Gaza and across the world. From the streets to the workplace, from university campuses to the classrooms, millions of people across the world and within North America have joined the movement for Palestinian liberation. In this plenary, leaders of the movement for Palestinian liberation in North America will reflect on the last 2 years, provide a sobering but productive analysis about where we go from here, to help us understand the movement's current state, its key challenges, its diverse strategies, and its future direction. I have the great privilege of introducing representatives of 4 leading organizations in the movement for Palestinian liberation in North America. We will hear from Mohammed Nablsi. Mohammed. That's right, give it up for Mohammed. Mohammed is a Palestinian-American lawyer and organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement, based in Houston, Texas. He has organized for Palestine in various capacities, from shaping political analysis for the role of the movement to educational programming to building out the infrastructure of the broader Palestine movement. We'll hear from Sean Aaron, a member of the steering committee for the National Students for Justice in Palestine and a current graduate student at Columbia University in New York. He also serves as the editor-in-chief of National SJP's publication, The Written Resistance, a quarterly print newspaper that platforms written analysis and artistic contributions from SJP chapters and student organizers across North America. We'll also hear from Eugene Perrier. Eugene is an American journalist, author, activist, host on Breakthrough News, which is covering us for this conference, and author of Shackled and Chained, Mass Incarceration in Capitalist America. Eugene is also a co-founder and Central Committee member for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And Eugene is a longtime organizer with the Answer Coalition since 2003, and he's going to be representing Answer today. And last but not least, we'll hear from Gemma Pash, who's the director of grassroots organizing at Jewish Voice for Peace, where she fosters powerful, locally rooted organizing at a national scale so that anti-Zionist Jews in the US can play their strongest possible role to end this genocide and US-Israel alliance enabling and funding it. I want to start off by recognizing that the 4 speakers today are people who have thoughtfully been assessing and strategizing and reflecting and reassessing and strategizing within the movement for the last 2 years. And that's a practice that we continuously need to do to reshape the direction of our movement. I think something that's so important about these organizations is the capacity to shift gear and understand the moment that we're in. And that's the first question that I want to start with for all of you. And we'll start with you, Mohammed, if that's okay. Looking back at nearly 2 years of heightened struggle, what is your assessment of the different and sometimes competing strategies and tactics taken up by different forces in the movement?
Okay, thank you, everyone. How are y'all feeling? It's so great to be here at the People's Conference, and there's so much effort, so much time, money spent to bring you all here together, and I think this is really important that we take an opportunity as a movement to come together, to cohere, to engage in critical discussions and exchanging perspectives, to network, to meet one another, to learn from so many different organizations playing so many different roles for the movement. We are all committed with Gaza as our compass, and that is what informs our reflections today. And so I want to talk to you all in terms of thinking about the work that we've done over the last few years, at least in separating what I see as 2 phases in our work. We have the work that we tried to do when Biden and the Democrats were in power, and the work and the efforts that we've had since Trump assumed power. And I think there's a major shift that took place in the transition between the two administrations. First, we had a Biden administration where there was an underlying assumption for the movement and a lot of our efforts that the Democratic Party, as the ruling party of the time, sees the Palestine movement to some extent, or the progressive movement that overlaps with it, as a part of its so-called coalition. And that if we engaged in pressure and essentially generated crisis for the Democratic Party, for the Biden administration, for our local councils and all of these different sort of institutions, that would then translate into different policy decisions by the Biden administration in relationship to Gaza. And I think it's important that we have done that because it taught us a few things about the nature of, one, Zionism in our government, in the way that the US relates to Israel, but also in terms of how we should think about our work as a movement in relationship to power. Now, with the emergence of Trump in power, what happened is we no longer have this administration that pretends to speak to you, right? Even though I would say the Democratic Party, in terms of its ruling, how it ruled in relationship to Gaza, didn't do that either, but they make no allusions, or they put forward no allusions about their relationship to Israel. And that has forced us to think about power in a very different way. And the main question we have in front of us, the main sort of task for us to sort of resolve is, what is our target now? If we spent a year and a half targeting the Biden administration because it held the levers of power and therefore needed those powers lifted off, or those levers lifted off of our people, what are we doing in this moment? Who is our target? Where do we have leverage? What do we do when we have a democratic crisis in institutions? Just a few days ago, the Democratic National Committee, despite only 7% of registered Democratic voters supporting continued aid to Israel, military aid to Israel, almost overwhelmingly voted down a resolution calling for an arms embargo. 7% translated to near unanimous opposition to an arms embargo in the actual institution of power. That is a crisis of democracy. And often what we hear from people on the liberal end of the spectrum is there's a sort of finger pointing at the Trump administration as sort of the carrier of undemocratic behavior. When in reality, this is a clear example of sort of removing the democratic will of the people from their actual institutions that claim to represent them. Yesterday, and so with that said, the question then becomes, we have this popular power, we have this 7% in terms of the Democrats, but even more so, across the political spectrum, the overwhelming majority of people oppose continued aid to Israel, continued military aid, continued arming, and also the diplomatic cover that the US government provides. And so, how do we translate this popular power, this popular will, into actual power? And where do we build that power, and how do we wield it? Those are the main questions that I want to try to answer in the next moment. Yesterday, the panel on the arms embargo really spoke to the power that we have in organizing campaigns. And I want to focus on the underlying strategic logic of what was presented yesterday. And I want to name that there are several pillars that enable Israel to execute this genocide. First and foremost is Western governments. And we know the details of it, the billions of dollars of aid, the political cover. And we believe that this targeting these forces was, the governments was the quickest and most efficient way to end this genocide. But that proved wrong. And we have to name that as a movement. That actually we weren't able to translate popular power into a change of policies within Western governments. And I think even the student movement can speak to this on their campuses as well. Second is the media. This is the second pillar, which has ran cover for genocide, laundered Israeli talking points to buy it time, justifying its crimes, and confusing and demoralizing people's support for Palestine. And third, in my opinion, the second most important pillar is the complicity of private actors. The corporations that provide Israel with technology, software, logistical infrastructure, consultation to execute every aspect of this genocide. From the cloud databases and AI technologies like those provided by Microsoft and Palantir and Amazon to store and process information to mass murder Palestinians and surveil their every single movement in existence, to the logistical companies like Maersk who aid in the transportation of the very cargo and components that allow this genocide to be sustained, to the consultancy groups, the military contractors, the logistics companies and PR firms like GHF, UG Solutions, SRS, all of these private actors, not to mention the Zionist lobby groups and the other institutions like the ADL and AIPAC that enable this genocide, these private actors are the core body, in my opinion, that are helping to sustain this genocide outside of the US government. And the question is, how do we as a movement end the role of this pillar in this genocide? That is our responsibility. And so, I'm going to speak a little bit more about the answer to this question, but I want to say two things. First, we have to transform our popular power into actual power through targeting this pillar, these companies like Maersk, through whether it's a city council resolution campaign to implement arms embargo in the ports of our cities, or the campaigns that specifically target Microsoft like we've seen with the workers, the actual employees of Microsoft themselves. This is how we translate popular power into a democratic power that's expressed through an actual strategic campaign. The second thing is that on a federal level, we do not have the power to actually move the movement's goals or demands in a way that reflects our power. But on this level, as far as these companies goes, through things like the campaigns on a local level, through building with unions, building with the actual communities around us, our neighborhoods, really thinking about our role not just as organizing for Palestine, but organizing for the democratization of our society on an actual local and communal level. Because that is what is preventing us from actually having power. So, the task at hand, what you all need to go away with is, we didn't convene here just to listen and learn. We convened in order to take our work and to transform it. The coalitions, the organizations that we formed, the work we've been doing on a day in and day out basis has to be about building our campaigns to translate the movement of people into the streets, into a movement that touches the powers we can touch. And those are the complicit corporate actors. And in that process, our movement feeds into the broader struggle for the democratization of our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Muhammad. Is this okay? Yeah, okay. Tough to follow, but I'll do my best. I don't have to say this, but the last 2 years have seen the largest student uprising in this country since 1968, of course, in protest of the Vietnam War and the slow neoliberalization of the university system in this country. But I want to sort of take that as some framing to talk about something I think is a bit more important, to contextualize the way that the student movement has progressed since the beginning of this genocide and where it might go from here. The past 2 years were not the largest uprising since 1968 in general. 2020, the uprisings after the murder of George Floyd and against police brutality and the carceral system as a whole, significantly shaped the minds of the organizers who would go on to carry out the Student Intifada last spring. Movements never exist in a vacuum, of course, we all understand this. But oftentimes we think of them or the tactical progression of them as sort of siloed instances of political history. And I just want to interrogate that, because I think that there's worthwhile material in seeing the legacy and the lineage that the Student Intifada followed that can help us understand what our tasks are, why we've failed, right? Why this is month 23 of a genocide that should never have begun in the first place. So just like we say that the genocide and displacement and colonization of Palestine didn't begin on October 7th, the organization, the tactical development, the strategy, all of these things about the Palestine movement, especially in the US, because we're all here, also didn't start on October 7th. We're embedded in a political legacy that sort of encapsulates all types of struggles. We learn from different struggles. We incorporate learnings and teachings from different struggles that we have experienced or observed in past and recent history. And I think that gives us a lot of content to work into our political strategy and a lot of ideas. And so I want to touch on the concept of ideation and experimentation that I think we saw articulated in the Student Intifada best, but I think that there's been multiple examples since. Using the sort of pre-existing political consciousness that came from 2020, from the uprisings that we saw and participated in, using the sort of tactical awareness that came from marching in the streets, being brutalized, watching comrades be brutalized throughout that summer and beyond. And also taking inspiration from previous non-Palestine related protests, Occupy Wall Street, the sort of anti-war but also anti-imperialist protests of the early 2000s, and re-articulating them into something that didn't quite fit within the boundaries of BDS, Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions, typical campaign plan, really gave the student movement a type of power and a type of consciousness raising that we hadn't seen before. And I don't want to romanticize a tactic, and I don't want to romanticize a specific time in the movement's past, because I don't think that that's helpful. But what I do want to say is that when we talk about the diversity of tactics and our effectiveness as an entire movement, and the way that we've moved over the past 2 years, I think that the Student Intifada provided a slight alternative vision of what it could look like to organize the base that we're talking about, what it could look like to not just approach the masses, but actually adopt the masses into a movement, allow them to express their agency, to make decisions within the movement, all towards the common goal of the liberation of Palestine largely, but the divestment of endowment money into these corporations, the removal of Israeli institutions and corporations from our campuses altogether, and the severing of all ties to the Zionist entity and all other colonial and imperial projects across the world. So I just want to take that sort of notion of experimentation and that notion of unexpected and maybe spontaneous development that the Student Intifada really expressed. And I think that when we talk about our successes and our shortcomings, I think that there's a lot of value to be held in not the actual event of the Student Intifada, but what it represented. A shift in consciousness and a shift in the willingness of individual people to exercise their free will in a way, in conjunction with each other, in a way that pushed us all forward. And so I think I'll leave it at that, because I would like to hear from Gemma and Eugene, but yeah, thank you.
Hi all, it's an absolute honor to be here. So thank you for having me. I feel the power of this room and how the gathering is fortifying our movement and our commitment collectively to ending this genocide, fighting for a free Palestine, and leaving with actions and tools to continue the struggle. So thank you. When I reflect back on the last 2 years and look at the moment we're at right now, the main point that emerges is one that's been mentioned by many speakers already throughout the conference, which is this gap between how the movement has had real gains at shifting popular opinion in embedding Palestine into any agenda for justice, making clear that that is non-negotiable, against the intractability of the US-Israel war machine and many of the levers of power that keep that machine running. We know that's not, again, we've been hearing throughout the conference, we're here in the belly of the beast. It's not a small thing to go up against those, and it's our obligation. There's a unique obligation to all of us in the United States, and there's also unique challenges. That first part, I do want us to take stock of. It's not a given, even in a genocide, horrifyingly, that people will move en masse to our side. And the movement made gains there through many different parts of the movement, many different sectors, different types of mobilizations, campaigns, the encampments, different narrative work, social media and traditional media, and work of building across movements consistently and over years before this moment. And all of those many different strategies and tactics mean that now over 60% of all voters in the most recent poll opposing weapons to Israel, something that was previously a very long-term goal of the movement. So we need to take into, that is real, that we have the masses with us. And with all of that forward motion, the power realities at the core of the US-Israel relationship and the mutually propped up war economy have just showed how enduring they are, how much power they have, especially those political and financial arenas. The reality is being exposed, the mask is off from Israel to the US, but exposure is insufficient. We need to continue building power, using that power at the most strategic leverage points, and contesting for many different types of power: narrative power, social power, economic power, governing power. Given that, I want to offer 3 core tasks that I see us having specifically as the North American movement for Palestine right now. The first and foremost, which I'll return to in a moment, is to do everything we can to immediately stop the genocide and find those levers that can do so most effectively. I really agree with what Mohammed was saying about the particular need to look after the economic and private sector campaigns at this moment. We also need to be defending our people and our communities here against rising authoritarianism and fascism in ways that continue to forge across movements in real ways that embed Palestine, that build relationships and understand that shared stake. And the third is to build durable movements for the long haul that are both wide and deep, that are really oriented towards scaling up at new levels. We might have millions of people in agreement about the baselines, but there is immense work to do deeper political education, to learn organizing collectively, and to teach people in a profoundly individualist country, and to learn from each other how to move collectively, including across difference, but in ways that are clear enough on our unity and our common goals. And then across those 3 categories, where can we build campaigns and be ready for the moments when we can accomplish all 3 in one way, in one moment, or through one campaign that any given group is taking on? I'll return later in the panel to those second and third categories, but wanted to talk more about what are the pressure points in this moment as the top focus for ending the genocide. We at JVP use an analysis of 3 pillars that's pretty similar to what was shared about the US-Israel alliance. As a US-based Jewish organization, we're figuring out what we specifically can do and our obligation to take down those pillars. But for me, they're a helpful framework for thinking about the different avenues we have: economic, political, and cultural. And again, where we've had so much success across the movement in shifting the culture, we need to keep building off of that to bring more pressure on the economic and political. For economic pressure campaigns, I don't want to just repeat. I think PYM is showing the path forward right now with the People's Arms embargo, everything that was shared on the panel yesterday. That combination of looking where we have the most strength, where our movements are the strongest, where our grassroots power is the strongest, and where the systems we're up against have the weakness. So whether it's Maersk shipping supply chains, and continuing to research identify where we have strong, where they have weak, and that is the places we can push further. There's so many divestment campaigns being pushed across the country right now. I don't think they all, they can be hard to imagine because there's a lot of different steps to get to actual divestment, but in addition to the student divestment campaigns, there's institutional divestment There's municipal and statewide campaigns, including one we're involved with to divest from Israel bonds, which are a crucial pillar of the Israeli economy. We're looking to tank the Israeli economy, and that is one of the ways, one of the tools we have to do so. Everything that's been said about labor and tech complicity, those are all crucial openings, and it's the obligation of each of us to figure out where we can best contribute. Where do we have the most leverage, and also which communities are we best positioned to organize as we need to build a bigger and bigger movement, again, of people that are not just with us in theory, but that are taking action. I also strongly agree that we cannot pin hopes on any kind of US government, but especially right now, and I also think we cannot let up there. There's unexpected fractures. We have a bizarre and egotistical president, and that means that there might be openings that emerge where mass popular pressure can deliver unexpected shifts. And I think just given the level of power that is centralized in the US government and US military, we can't abandon that, even as it may not be the focus for everyone, and that's all right. We're seeing public pressure translated to unprecedented support for the Block the Bombs bill right now in Congress. Congress is a profoundly anti-Palestinian institution and will be one of the last places to shift, and we need to continue pushing there. They're not doing that out of the goodness of their heart. Congress is shifting because they are seeing how popular pressure through sustained campaigns and mobilizing means that they will lose their jobs if they do not start to shift towards arms embargo. I think I'll end there now and return to some of those other pieces later. Thanks all.
All right, it just turns on for you. Didn't know if I was doing the right thing. Anyway, thank you everybody, I really appreciate it. Thank you to my co-panelists, it's an honor. I really appreciate all of the endorsers and mobilizers for this conference. And I also want to give a huge thanks to the many, many volunteers who are working extremely hard all day and all night to make this possible for us. You know, I'd also like to just open by saying that we need to continue to push to free all political prisoners, and I would like to I'd like to dedicate my remarks here today, whatever they may be and whatever you may take them for, to Imam Emil Al-Jamin, the former H. Rap Brown, the former chairman of SNCC. And I think it's particularly important to lift him up. He's in Florence Supermax prison because he was one of the leaders of SNCC when SNCC took a bold position in 1967 to back the Palestinian people and to create an unbreakable solidarity between the Black Liberation Movement, the Palestinian Liberation Movement that has lasted from the southern fields where people were organizing from the right to vote to the streets of Ferguson where the Palestinian people were doing everything they could to continue the fight against the racist machine here in the United States. You know, I think when we're reflecting on the past 2 years and tactics, I feel we can only really reflect and measure our tactics against the objective reality of the imperial system that we are up against. Because we know that, and it's been stated here I think very well so far, that what is happening in Gaza, what is happening in Palestine, the settler colonial project of Israel is not random, it's not an aberration, but it's really a key link in the broader imperial project of a handful of countries, and as Lamise told us in the last session, a handful of people to dominate the vast majority of the world. I mean, when the Zionist forces went to the British imperialists and said support us, they didn't say do it because this is some great thing, they said do it because it's going to allow you to control this critical region of the world as you're trying to do everything possible to control Africa, Asia, and Latin America for your own self-aggrandizement, and that continues to today. And I think that's why it's no surprise that even at great risk to their own political careers and certainly the moral stain that will be placed on them for perpetuity and generations, so many people have been willing to back this genocide wholeheartedly and openly despite the huge amount of opposition that we've seen. So I think we have to measure ourselves against that objective reality when we consider our tactics, which is why I think the range of tactics, because there's really not one. I think, a lot of us here have worked together in many different ways, in many different contexts. We've done some of the same same things, and we've also done a lot of different things. But I think one of the main sort of North Stars, if you will, of where we've been going is to create a mass movement for solidarity with Palestine. So I think the tactics that have contributed to creating a mass movement in solidarity with Palestine are the most effective tactics, because imperialism is not moved by willpower, but by social power. We know that this is a system that is built on the exploitation of the working classes, the oppression and exploitation of the oppressed nations, and the ideological and narrative apparatuses that emanate in many different ways to control, confuse, and to propagandize people. So unless we're able to build a mass movement that has bases in all of those particular areas, we'll never be able to turn our potential power into our real power. So even though I think every single one of us wakes up every day thinking we wish more was changing, that the genocide was over, I also want us to consider the transformation we've gone to from just having a Palestine solidarity movement to having a mass movement in solidarity with Palestine. We've had the opportunity to reach into the labor movement. I mean, let's not forget that the Painters, which is not really a union people think of as like the most progressive union, had its president, Jimmy Williams, said that they're going to divest their pension funds from Israel. We had the African Methodist Episcopal Church, one of the most venerable and longest running African American denominations in this country, vote in their General Assembly, their General Synod, for an arms embargo and an end to all U.S. aid in Israel. We had not just the wave of encampments, and the encampments were critically important, but let's also not forget that on all of those campuses and many more, there were almost unanimous, massive majority votes amongst the student body for those universities to divest from Israel. So in the context of where we're trying to go and where we need to do and measuring ourselves against the objective power of the imperial machine we are up against, we have created a mass movement that is reaching into all of the key areas of social power that we would need to move to be able to not just change that apparatus, but in fact to transform it and overthrow it. And I think that and I say that because what's the corollary here? I think the corollary is the least effective tactics are the one that denigrate mass movement, that give short shrift to the need to move consciousness. But the reality is mass consciousness is critically important to victory. I mean, you think about the struggle against slavery in this country, and I'll wrap here. I mean, that was a long, protracted struggle. It was hundreds of years. And it's not because people weren't fighting hard. People were fighting incredibly hard in many different ways, in extraordinary circumstances, but it wasn't really until mass consciousness shifted in the appropriate ways that they were able to take advantage of that to actually defeat slavery, overthrow slavery, and institute a new system of human dignity and human freedom that many people thought could never exist in the history of the world. So my last piece is this. What we do is critically important. In some ways it's everything, because if we don't act, nothing is there. But there are also things that are outside of our control that will happen. And I believe they will happen, but they are not things we can just conjure up through force of will, however much we might like. And the question becomes, are we prepared to intervene when those shifts begin to happen in society, to move the levers we need to move to make transformative change? And I think we've taken some of the first steps there in the tactics we've taken to build a mass movement in this country, to reach into so many different sectors. I think there's a lot more for us to build on and do, and I think we'll talk about that as we move forward. But I think that's how I reflect on those tactics, as objectively against the imperial machine, we're moving into the areas we need to move to build the social power to win.
Thank you. Thank you all. I mean, I think we're just starting off, really, and there's already so much that's come up, so much. I can already identify so much points of alignment and so many different areas and strategies that you all are working on. And I think I kind of want to put on the table the thing that has been on the minds probably of everyone in this room before we got to this conference, which is you all are talking about all of the different inroads into this movement. And Eugene, I love what you put at the very end, which we're not trying for a Palestine movement. We're trying for a mass movement for Palestine, right? Like, this is not just about Palestine. It's about shifting the levers, as you said. And Sean, I really appreciated you talking about this student intifada, or student uprising of the last year, coming off of the heels of movements for Black lives. And we can even see that coming off of the anti-Iraq war and the Occupy moment. All these things kind of been accumulating over the course of the last 3 decades, right? We are living in a time of crisis. This doesn't take away the extremity, recognition of the extremity of the situation in Gaza, but it is about getting to the materiality of what it means to affect change and to build mass movements. And I think the thing that's been on a lot of our minds, including mine, has been about the political terrain here in the US, specifically, and how it's changed with the heightened repression, the Trump administration, the diminishing support for Israel, and the crackdown on immigration. We are seeing, I'm curious for you to share what you think the role of Palestine is in shaping this terrain. You know, going back to what you said, Sean, it's not just about what happened to the student intifada. We're seeing a war on education, right? So what is the role of Palestine in shaping this terrain? And what responsibility do we have to Palestine in this context? We'll start with Mohammed.
Wow, that's a big question. So I think we experienced waves of repression that precede Trump, obviously, and there were a lot of lessons to be learned from that. But then under the Trump administration, there was almost a focused approach that was meant to make examples out of specific people, especially within the student movement, and that was meant to paralyze us, to make us sort of cower in the face of this overwhelming machine that is able to target people and create these scenes, this theater of snatching people off the streets in order to make us step away from organizing for Palestine. And I actually think that the strength of the movement in terms of targets, which I'm going to come back to, I want to follow up on the comments that I initially made, because I think responding to repression is actually about our work for Palestine and not about our work against repression. Is that our strengths is in building the mass movement for Palestine, even and including if that means facing repression. And in fact, historically, the advancements made in this country on building on the rights that at one point existed for a few and expanding them was through the movements that fought for the civil rights of people in this country, that fought for black liberation in this country, that fought against imperialism in Vietnam and in Central America. That is where we actually made gains in terms of creating laws through the courts that are now being used in briefs for the case of Mahmoud Khalil, for example. Like it was through the actual social movements that on their substantive level, not on their response to repression, that they fought back against repression. And so for Palestine and the movement for Palestine, there's a number of different things that we should think about. And I'm going to go back to this point that I was making about targets and really sort of try to distill what I was trying to say. And in building off, Gemma, your point about our strengths versus their weaknesses. Our strengths are in collective action. Where they're trying to sap us of our democratic participation, or like the actual power of our democratic participation, organization is what actually allows us to overcome that. Because it is through, like an organization is the democratic expression of a collective of people. When you list out demands, points of unities, that is about you organizing yourself in a way to determine what you want of the world around you. And where are we strong as a Palestine movement? What is the one way that the Palestine movement distinguishes itself from other movements? Or what is the flavor it adds? That is internationalism. The struggle, this genocide is an international genocide. And our response to it must be an international response. And here's what I mean by international. Let me clarify. I mean internationalist response. It means seeing that our struggles see no borders. And what are the examples that have demonstrated this? Whether it's the Gaza flotillas that we heard from Huwaida, whether it's the convoys, the Tunisian convoys in the March to Gaza that happened in Egypt, whether it's the fact that the Mask Off Merce campaign is not a campaign carried by PYM. It's a campaign that's been carried by progressive forces all over the world, including states. And so this is where we are strong, in internationalizing our struggle. And on a domestic level, it's going beyond our movement, right? And actually, the weakness of the Palestine movement in the US is the weakness of progressive movements in the US. Progressive movements, it's the ceiling of the Palestine movement, I always say this, is the ceiling of the left in the US. So that means we need to break that ceiling. And so, how do we break that ceiling? What do these corporations, this primary target that I believe is the main focus that should be of our work, and I agree with Gemma, like the priority is to end the genocide, and even that if that means creating crisis for the Trump administration, that's what we do, because the Palestine is a populist issue. It's touched the right. Trump carried his fascistic agenda on a wave of populism that was against war, that was against the corruption of both parties, and he just promised them something different, and that's the wave he rode. And that same populist movement now is seeing Palestine as a symbol of endless war, as seeing it as a symbol of the corrupt things like AIPAC and the lobby, the Israel lobby. And so for us, as the Palestine movement, we need to bring answers to these issues that people are facing here to meet that need. But our answers are also about exposing the role of these corporations by building power in very important ways. And this is what I'll name. This is where we have powers in relationship to corporations. First, obviously the workers. The workers that actually move this machine, but not just domestically. We've learned that from the Mask Off Merce campaign and all of our efforts around arms embargo. It's the unions of the world that are actually capable of stopping this genocide. The second is friendly states, and this is why internationalism is so important. We heard from the Vice President of Spain on Friday, talking to us. When is a president or a vice president of any global north country ever spoke to people about ending a genocide? And this is despite, like what was said earlier, the pressure that Spain and South Africa and Colombia are facing from the global system to not stand with Palestine. And the third thing is, these corporations like Microsoft, like Amazon, these corporations depend on curating an appearance for the world that positions them as needed. But the reality is, on an international level, that is where we can weaken them, because they have public contracts with these friendly states. They have relationships with these unions. There are civil societies out there that exist that are not going to be friendly to the role of the genocide. And so think about our efforts here on a local level, the campaigns we carry out in our cities, not as just feeding into a campaign in your city, but as feeding into an international effort. It is PYM's work on Maersk in the US is not alone what forced Maersk to stop shipping and transporting goods out of settlements. It's the work that we did on an international level, right? And that's what we have to understand from our movement, is that's how our power exists, because we are feeding into something much larger than us. And so our power now, as you all know, many of you participated in ceasefire resolutions. And this is an important thing. Ceasefire resolutions, and our speakers, especially on the Gaza, that spoke from the perspective of Gaza, we're talking about, we don't need words, we need actions. We don't need statements, we need actions. Ceasefire resolutions were good in the early period because they were statements that noted where the people stood, but what are actions? These city councils told us, a lot of them, that what's happening in Gaza is not local to the concerns of the people of my community. But whether your city has a contract with Microsoft that's aiding in a genocide, whether its port is transporting weapons, whether there is a storage facility, a warehouse in your community that's housing bombs, housing bulldozers, housing Oshkosh tactical vehicles that are then being shipped to a genocide, that is of local concern. And so actually, a movement around city council that's about the role of domestic companies in the genocide is a point of weakness, in my opinion. And the reason that corporations are so important is because, you know, these billionaires, the tech billionaires, their alignment with Trump, they've been really explicit of how they view the future. And I think it's extremely important for us to listen very carefully to the things that they've told us. They see the future as being drawn from the lessons of what they were able to do in Gaza. They see a future of scarcity. And what they instead propose as the solution is to create feudal, tech-feudal spaces where we all are excluded and they continue to benefit. And their consolidation of power within this administration is a reflection of that future strategy. And so the fight for Palestine, the fight against Palantir, and its technology that's facilitated a systematic targeting of Palestinian life in Gaza, is a fight for the future of our people here. Like, that is a very real thing that we have to contend with. They're not just creating technologies of surveillance and repression and targeting for Gaza. They're creating it for all of us. They will deploy it in different ways. And you know what? We should know when they targeted our immigrant brothers and sisters over the last 5 months that these technologies that use to categorize and chronicle and create these databases and lists of people with their faces and fingerprints so that they can more effectively round them up and throw them in prisons. That's who they are. So the fight, we have to make these fights real. We haven't done enough to raise mass consciousness because our fights haven't intersected in the ways that they need to yet. And it's not just on the Palestine movement to make that connection, it's on all of the other movements to connect with us. So, in the end, what I'm saying is that our actual strength is in fighting for Palestine and not just fighting against repression. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to follow up on actually that closing point. I think is a great segue about fighting repression. I do want to acknowledge first, though, I don't mean to diminish the impact of the repression that we do face. It's very real. It has significant impact on us, our families, our friends, especially those of us who are at risk or more marginalized. And I think it's also important that we acknowledge that the state has crushed movements larger, stronger, more advanced, politically, better equipped, armed. You know, movements that are much, much larger and stronger than our own have been crushed by the state before, over and over and over again. And that's why the US empire continues to exist, and that's why the US empire is able to carry out this genocide alongside the Zionist entity in Palestine. That being said, I think that this, to your point, Mohammed, the type of repression that we're facing and the sort of high-techness of it, the adoption of sort of the tech sector and the mechanization of the repression that we're facing, is a result of the state of the empire that we're in today, which is an empire in decline, and it's an empire in crisis. Like you said, the billionaire class or the ruling class, who are seeking their own betterment, but also their own survival in the face of an empire that's clearly bursting at the seams or showing some cracks. I think that we should see this. We should see this for what it is, okay? I don't think that we should diminish or ignore the impacts of this repression, but I also think that this repression should be viewed as a progression or a form of progress of our movement. The ruling class can no longer rely on coercion or culture or rules or nationalism, right, to preserve its position at the helm of this country. And so we've seen this against community members in the streets. We've seen this during the student intifada with brutality against students, the mechanization of brutality on campus, the surveillance systems on campus, as well as in the streets. What we're seeing is a ruling class that's sliding into violence to preserve their chokehold on the people of this country and also the world at large, of course. And so, although this is, this can be scary and sometimes debilitating, like you said as well, Mohammed, it's a shock attempt to get us to stop what we're doing. This is also erratic behavior. I think Gemma also mentioned, Trump being unpredictable and childish. This is not a calculated or cold response, but it's a little chaotic. It's unstable, and that instability is useful. I think that's what makes Palestine, to go back to the original question, I think that's what makes Palestine special. It's Palestine and the movement for Palestine that forced those cracks open. It's the movement for Palestine that forced the ruling class to abandon, at some times, the rules-based international order and slide into what we could call fascism domestically. It's the movement for Palestine globally that have forced open the contradictions of the international, the international law and the global system that keeps the third world or the global south in perpetual subordination to the United States and Europe. And this is strength, right? What we're seeing is strength being leveraged on the global stage, but also here in the US, on college campuses, in our streets, against corporations, against Maersk. All of these are forms of popular pressure that have forced a response that maybe we weren't prepared for, but a response nonetheless that pushes our movement forward into new territory. The student movement also broke through some illusions and exposed some systems. Divestment is no longer viewed as a question of bureaucracy or an administrative process. Our university's direct assistance to this genocide and many across the world is no longer viewed as something that we can remedy through an appeal or a resolution or a meeting with a president. We understand now that our universities are controlled by the exact same ruling class that exerts power across the globe. The people that sit in our boardrooms in our universities are the same people that chair the boards of Lockheed Martin, of Northrop Grumman, of all of these different corporations and entities that exert their power against the Palestinian people in Gaza, against Sudan, against Congo, against the black nation here and indigenous nations here. This is all the same ruling class. And so when we see that ruling class install a president like Trump, we should also see this as a form of crisis, of course, but also a legacy of instability that has enabled and encouraged genocides across the world, Iraq, Afghanistan, Cambodia, Korea. We should also see this as sort of a boldness that's starting to be challenged, right? As students across the country view their board of trustees as their primary enemy and not the bureaucracy of the university and not the systems that make things more difficult to pass divestment. As they see the board of trustees as individual actors that are actively standing in their way, actively standing against stopping a genocide, we see power. We see power in that. So the tactics and the strategies that are needed to push that line forward to confront the board of trustees materially, this is the primary question now. But when we talk about politicization and the progress of the movement and what's needed, this is why we're here today in this room, all 4,000 of you, and so we need to reinvent the playbook, but that's exciting. And the repression, the repression is something that we can survive in community with one another. But the writing of the playbook and the changes that are needed to be made also requires that same community and that same unity. So, yeah, this is why we're here.
I think what I can add to the perspectives already shared about this current terrain, the moment we're in, and the repression we're up against, is that there are also, I think it's essential that we are part of a very broad anti-authoritarian, anti-fascist front here in the US, and that we do that in ways that continually embed and re-embed Palestine and draw the connections to every struggle being waged right here, right now, for immigrants, for healthcare, for bodily autonomy of women and trans people, for people's basic economic needs being met when billions are being funneled to enable a genocide and not to communities here. It means there's we're talking a lot about building a mass movement, and there's new opportunities for mass movement since Trump took office. More and more people are seeing the shared stakes of what we are up against and how much the things that we already know who are working towards Palestine, how those come home against communities here in the United States. And I do believe we need to be part of blocking efforts with the broadest possible set of people that will make it harder and harder for us to keep fighting. We know our democracy is already very limited, but the mechanisms that have been hard-won by movements over decades and centuries are being rolled back. Those things that help us bridge between popular will and actual policy. And again, no matter how frustrated or disillusioned we are with these systems that do not serve us and have never served us, it's not enough to have Palestine be part of a progressive agenda if we cannot win any kind of progressive agenda. So I think we need to remain part of fighting the larger movements that are fighting to keep the mechanisms we have in place and welcoming more and more people into it and draw those connections from Palestine and international struggle to fighting for the things that might be most pressing in people's lives here in the United States. We don't all need to be focused on that, but I think it needs to be part of our broader set of strategies in terms of something that we see as the ecosystem at play and the level of mass movement we can build. Within that, again, we all have different roles to play. We all need to be constantly thinking, who are we best positioned to organize? Those of us who are not Palestinians have an absolute duty to our Palestinian comrades to identify where we are best positioned to make impact, what levers we have proximity to, what communities we're able to organize. And then we must organize them with rigor and with discipline and seriousness. And organizing does mean reaching people who are not fully with us and bringing them closer and closer in. That is how you continue to build power and grow people power. Those of us who are Jewish, we have a specific role to play. We have to build enough power so that any notion that genocide somehow has to do with Jewish safety or that resisting genocide is anti-Semitism, I hate even saying those words, we have to build enough power that the Jewish Zionist institutions forwarding those notions has zero water and zero power. And I think when I earlier was offering those three components of doing everything we can to stop the genocide first and foremost, and then also defending and being part of broader movements against fascism and authoritarianism here in the US, and then all of that as part of long-term movement building. Repression is a lot of, I think, where we can find those moments that link actually all of those. So when there's escalated repression on the movement or on individuals fighting for Palestine, we foremost need to defend each other and those facing the repression, and be ready to bring back attention to Gaza and ramp up our campaigns. As soon as there is attention, we need to draw back to the core actors that we've been discussing, the targets, the corporations, fighting for a people's arms embargo, to build off those moments of mainstream breakthrough. And then we have to be ready to activate and bring in new swaths of people who are angry, who are horrified, and who don't know how to act, because we are not taught how to organizing in the US. That is not part of our education. Something our movements are building out with each other in the face of decades of repression that's tried to dismantle movements. And so we need to continue to help people at those moments where they can connect the dots between the repression, the authoritarianism, ending the genocide, fighting for a free Palestine, and growing our movements. I'll end there.
You know, I really want to commend the comrades who brought us the slogan, Gaza is the compass, because I don't view that as a rhetorical flourish whatsoever. I believe that the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the ongoing attempts of the Zionists to crush the Palestinian people is a compass that helps orient us towards everything happening in the globe today geopolitically. And when you look at what's happening now, I mean, you look at Trump, you look at the agenda, and Mohammed, I think you're so right. I mean, Trump has to be the greatest con man in history. Also the only president we have in the WWE Hall of Fame, for whatever you want to take that for. But when you look at what Trump really represents, if the 20th century was the American century, the agenda of at least that wing of capital, which I think is actually quite broad, is to make sure that the 21st century remains the American century, a century of domination by one small group of people who claim to represent a whole country and dominating the entire world. And that has many facets. And of course, when you think of the context of the American century, which comes after World War II, and then you can think about the moments of consolidation when its power was being created and slipping away. I mean, you can think about McCarthyism in the time of the 50s. It was a time of great mass repression and an across-the-board attack on working-class people here in this country and oppressed people, and also the anti-colonial movements rising around the globe. You can look at the rise of quote-unquote neoliberalism, as we call it now, when it seemed that the American empire was in trouble, a time of great repression. You think of COINTELPRO and all of the movements of that time, and an all-out attack against the movements of oppressed people all around the world, rising against imperialism, including the struggle of the Palestinian people. And I think we're in a similar moment where the empire feels itself slipping and it's waging an across-the-board attack on working-class and oppressed people at home and abroad to wring whatever concessions that people have gained, to pull them back and to make sure that anyone who has some sort of idea that anyone other than the United States and their sort of lesser partners in Europe are going to run the world gets the message that that's not going to be possible. So we're seeing again a wave of repression and wars around the globe in an attempt to try to put that genie that is eroding the power of U.S. empire back into the bottle. And Palestine plays a crucially important role here. And I think we really have to understand this in the context of this geopolitics and these shifting sands, because the struggle of the Palestinian people is the key bulwark in preventing the consolidation of the 21st century becoming yet another century dominated by imperialism, capitalism, and exploitation. Why is that? Well, you look at the context of what's happening. There's a lot of things that you can say about China, of course, but why does the U.S. hate China? You can read it in their own documents. They say it's a competitor, it's a challenger. It's a country that seems to not only in and of itself, but in its relations with other countries, be unlocking possibilities that some people, even many of them bad people, to be honest with you, but certainly not U.S. ruling class people or European ruling class people, will actually have more of a say in how the world is run. So this is why President Obama has the pivot to Asia. He starts the pivot to Asia. He says we need to isolate, we need to stop that, we need to stop that momentum, we need to stop that motion. But of course, starting with the Carter Doctrine, most of the U.S. military power is in West Asia and in North Africa. So they're pivoting out of that area, or that's what they want to do, and they want to move into Asia. But that actually makes the Zionist project maybe not more important than it's ever been. I don't know how to judge that historically, but it certainly makes it absolutely critically of pinpoint importance, because without Israel, the Western powers would no longer be able to control this critical crossroads of the world, this resource-rich region, the cradle of civilization in many different ways. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at that strategic importance. And the struggle of the Palestinian people for freedom, for self-determination and dignity speaks to the exact opposite agenda of the imperialists. It speaks to a crossroads of the world, a cradle of civilization, a West Asia and North Africa rooted in peace, rooted in people living together regardless of whatever your religion may be, rooted in a democratic set of values. I mean, it's the exact opposite of the brutal, corrupt regimes that have been installed with Israel at the center to maintain imperial hegemony. So crushing the Palestinian people is critically important to the entire imperial project to reassert its own power at a moment that it is slipping. So Gaza is the compass that helps us orient and understand that reality. And that lets us see that Gaza is sitting in the middle of everything. It's not a peripheral issue, it's a central issue. And in fact, this is why they're so afraid of the movement we're building. It really is the potential of what we're doing as much as the actuality of it. Because they see that it touches so many different issues, the Palestine issue, because of the centrality of what's happening, even if people aren't fully conscious of what I just said. Just the reality of it, the way it plays out in the subconscious, it's clear, it's touching so many different factors. And it's creating the type of gumbo, if you will, the cross-pollination of different movements and communities and forces that can come together. And I'll close this by saying this. When the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, had a justice journey through the South that ended up in some of the immigrant detention centers in Louisiana. Which in and of itself is important, and obviously the pushing forward of the struggle of immigrant rights. And I was thinking of a brother I know who is on the justice journey. He's from New York, black man, lives in Atlanta, is organizing his co-workers at Dunkin' Donuts and has led them on several strikes. And I saw a video of him getting off the bus in Alexandria in front of an immigrant detention facility, and he comes off rocking a keffiyeh. And I just thought, that's what they really are afraid of. That we can turn that from just a relative few of us with consciousness into a real power of the Dunkin' Donuts workers, the janitors, the Palestinian people, the black nation, the Native Americans. If we can turn that from something that now is seeds into a plant that really grows, they are in deep, deep trouble. And they understand Gaza is the compass around the world that puts that centrality in front of us and allows us to move strategically and to move towards victory.
Drop the mic, Eugene. It was so powerful. So Gaza is the compass. You guys, Gaza is the compass. It's not rhetorical. It's not metaphorical. In this panel, you all provided us a sobering analysis. You provided us an analysis of the repression we're facing and how it's impacting us. And still, the potential is there. Palestine, Gaza, the potential for liberation of Palestine is perhaps more palpable and stronger than ever before. The potential for Palestine to be the nexus in which all of our liberation struggles are being achieved simultaneously is being mobilized at once. I think that this is something important to think of materially, because one thing that's so obvious to so many of us 2 years into genocide is that in the recent period, popular participation in our protests has been on the decline. We are not seeing the level of energy, the level of momentum, and we have to be honest about that. We are 2 years into a genocide. People are feeling grief, people are exhausted. We have exhausted what feels like every potential avenue, and we are still in a genocide. The despair is thick, right? Popular participation has been on the decline, whether it's from grief, whether it's from the fear of the repression of the state coming after us at all levels, threatening our organizations, declaring a war on education, conflating anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and weaponizing false allegations of anti-Semitism against anyone who challenges the U.S. imperialist policy and funding and arms for Israel. So we're almost at the end of our time. But I want to ask each of you, if you could just give us a minute, 2 minutes, where do we go from here, right? What is the role of our organizations in responding to this? Sentiments of fatigue and grief and cynicism and fear. Where do we go from the place of not having the mass energy that we had the first year of the genocide?
So I think this conference kind of models that, no? Like, what is the energy you guys feel? Where are we getting that energy from? You know, especially in a moment of extreme despair, seeing what we've seen. I think it's speaking with clarity. I think it's empowering people to actually transform what we're able to do, whether it's speaking out, whether it's organizing as ourselves, whether it's carrying out campaigns, into tangible strategic targets that have to respond to us. And I think in the last few weeks, we've seen that on a few fronts. When there was this mass effort, it was very simple. Egyptian gentleman, I forget, I think it was in the Netherlands, in The Hague, went up to the Egyptian embassy and wrapped a little lock around the gates to expose the complicity of the Egyptian state. Did you see how the Egyptian state responded? But did you see how it inspired everyone else to act? It is these things, it's because Egypt was a target that responded. It was because it took us months to figure out what are we gonna do next in light of the Trump administration. I think when we build power that wins, people find energy. And you all all are a crowd that feels and that desires and that can see victory very close in front of them. So that is the energy we need to bring to our communities. People need to feel inspired, need to be moved. It's not alone. The one thing that I say repression does is it makes you feel alienated and isolated. The only thing that allows you to overcome that is community and organization and strength. And that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it's important for us to sort of approach our movement with the knowing that mass participation is never a guarantee. When we're facing something as horrific as this genocide has been, the movement of the people emotionally gave us strength, and it still gives us strength. But that's not all you can rely on. Just like Muhammad just said, this community building, but not just a community in the social sense, community politically. In a country that seeks to individualize every single one of us and ensure that we never unite, to expose our state and our social structures, reliance on our own exploitation. This is something that only active, intentional participation in community building and organization, both of them go hand in hand with each other, can actually achieve. And I just want to note, we're all in this room. The foundation of our politic is a genuine care for the betterment of people across the world. This is something that I think 98% of the country would agree with. Okay, the ruling class obviously does not have that attitude towards people, but this is something that we should all keep in mind, even if people are undereducated about the cause, if people care more about another cause than this, if people are facing their own exploitation and are more interested in combating that. These are all things that we can work with. And these are things that build community in a different way. We don't all have to completely politically align in order to oppose this genocide and bring it to a close. What I will say as well, though, is that need to build consciousness in the masses and to consistently pull people in is something that's really difficult to do when our repression escalates to the extent that it has. There's a tendency to withdraw or to close in, to become secretive and underground. There's a tendency to shield ourselves from the state through anonymity and actually obscuring our actions and what we're doing. I think that there are times where that's necessary. I think that there's also times where that actively harms us. And so I think the path forward, like Muhammad said and like Lubna said earlier as well, I think the path forward is to insist, despite the state's repression against us, despite all of the efforts to fragment this movement and fragment all of our other sister movements that we fight alongside, I think that the only answer is to act on the community building and organizing that this conference represents, but not just every single year, not just every 12 months in a large auditorium like this, but to do it every single day, in every single avenue possible, locally, regionally, nationally, until we build a movement that's capable of achieving our goals in less than 23 months. Thank you.
Yes to every word you both said. I'm thinking a lot of just a theme we're all touching on of we're so deeply steeped in individuality here in the US, here in the heart of empire, in this stage of capitalism, that moving consistently towards building collective power is not easy. It's swimming upstream against the dominant culture and the ways of being. And we need it. We need it not only to end this genocide, but also for our souls and for our ability to be with each other and fight the alienation of the systems we live in. I think about how even a lot of really important sites of politicization and of learning, like academia or social media, can reinforce or reward the sense that political struggles individual or about finding the right idea. I want to offer that we really do need to practice building relationships with each other, not on social media, and in real life, where we can struggle through differences and build unity in much more rooted ways. And I'm so, again, admiring of the ways this conference is doing so. I think we're all so overwhelmed by the brutality of the world we live in that it's a tempting fantasy that if we say the right things or adopt the right ideas, we're no longer complicit. But we are all complicit in mass violence, including this genocide, until we succeed in changing the world we live in. We have to win. Doing that means we need to keep building mass. We need to find the ways, messy and imperfect, but also bold, strategic, and disciplined as possible to band together with each other. There's always a risk to that, a risk to being part of something bigger than ourselves, being part of an organization. It means being part of something imperfect. But that's our task. How do we reach massive numbers of people, get as many of them as possible to take action, and then do that in ways that bring more and more into belonging, into deeper commitment, into learning and skilling up? How do we do that for each other? I understand organizing as an embodied commitment to our collective transformation, to keep going and doing all we can with rigor and honesty and love, and bringing more and more people into it. It's a sacred and necessary task we're all doing together, so I'm profoundly honored to be part of it here and for what we all take home from this. Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank my co-panelists and also our excellent facilitator. Fantastic panel and a great discussion. You know, when I think about these times and these moments, when I think about any time in the struggle that gets hard, I always like to think about Harriet Tubman. Because, you know, they tell a story that when she was bringing people back and forth, you know, they would get there. It's a tough struggle. You know, you're moving through swamps, you're moving through woods, you got dogs coming after you. And if you get caught, the best case scenario is that you're returned to slavery. In fact, the most likely thing is that they're going to kill you right there on the spot. And certainly Harriet Tubman, they were going to kill her. They had a bounty on her head. But it was a tough journey. You know, you think you want to run, but it's hundreds of miles. You start running, and the next thing you know, you've been going for a few days and you think, you know what? Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe we should just go back, ask for forgiveness. And they say that Harriet Tubman used to always say to people, we come too far to go back now. And I think that's where we are. We have so many challenges and so many things that we see, but our people have sacrificed so much. The people of Palestine have sacrificed so much. We've come too far. We've done too much. We've struggled too hard to turn back now, however difficult it may be. They used to sing in the civil rights movement, the only thing that we did right was the day we started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on. Thank you.
That's right, hold on. I want to just extend my humble thanks to all of you, to all of your organizations, to the bases of your groups. I also want to acknowledge this is a mass movement. It's not just for Palestine. It's based on the principles of truth and freedom and liberation for all our people, past and present, for all our struggles here and across the world. Thank you to all of you for situating this in historical context, for situating this in internationalist context, and our bounded principles with other people and causes as Palestinian movement. I think I also want to just take a moment to acknowledge here that each of these organizations have presented such a vital contribution to the movement. I want to give such love and thanks to the PYM for being the anchors of bringing us all together, of uniting so many of our groups and organizations and sectors, for providing us political clarity and strategic intentionality and organized discipline, an example of organized discipline, particularly in leading the way with arms embargo campaign and the mask off Maersk campaign. It is not just a PYM campaign, as Mohammed stated earlier. It is an example of what we can all be doing in every corner of the earth, an example of achieving material wins, not just for Gaza, and not just for this present moment, but because we know and recognize this is a long-term struggle. I want to give love and thanks to the student movement and NSJP. Let's acknowledge my grandfather, God rest his soul, said, "Only and ever trust the students and the workers." And it's the students and the workers who have been leading the way this time as well. The students are the ones who are always forcing us to test the boundaries of possibility, are always forcing us outside our comfort zones, are always making connections. And thank you for that, because without that, you are the glue that has held on to so much, and there's been so much promise in this movement in North America that came through the student uprising of last year. JVP and more broadly the anti-Zionist Jewish movement have been at the front lines of challenging the conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. We know that we are a movement that is resisting imperialism and Zionism, occupation and apartheid, siege and genocide. There is no hate inside this movement. That's a weaponization that has been used to crush dissent connected to the repression industry. And giving us examples in direct action, the continued campaigns for divest from Israel bonds and support for the Block the Bombs initiatives and other kinds of campaigns. And finally, Answer Coalition, for always reminding us that the Palestinian struggle is an international struggle, for bridging us with the working class, with black and brown and indigenous people, with the struggle for third world liberation, reminding us that the project of revolutionary decolonization is incomplete without the decolonization of Palestine, and for being alongside us for the last 2 years, for the last many, many years, situating Palestine within the anti-war movement for as long as we've been friends. And thank you to all of you and all of the other groups and movements, healthcare workers, artists, students, youth organizers, the feminist collective, those are my sisters, all of the people who are coming from all walks of life. We are all part of this movement. And right now the time is not to just speak out. Speaking out is not enough. It is the time to continue challenging our own selves, our own groups and own communities to understand how to strengthen our organized practice in every single city and group that we exist within. Thank you so much.
Give it up one more time for our amazing panelists and moderator. We just heard about our role in North America. In addition to the ongoing organizing we must do for our movement and shifting the power to end this genocide, we also need to support the steadfastness of our people in Gaza. As you walk outside today, outside the hall, there will be people who with donation boxes who are collecting funds for the people of Gaza, supporting their steadfastness. Everything and anything helps. For the rest of the day, we are meeting again at 5 o'clock for our sessions, but the doors open at 4:30, so you can go ahead to your sessions. There are 4 sessions happening now. And then today at 7 p.m., tonight at 7 p.m., we will meet in this ballroom for the amazing Washah dance troupe and Beledi dance troupe, who came all the way from Palestine to dance and show us moves and dances of resistance. So please go to your sessions. We'll see you here at 7 p.m.